All right, due apologies for that slight delay in starting. It was due to technical hitches. Good day and welcome on today's edition of the show. It's always nice to have you join us, like we always say. This is Political Spectrum coming to you live from Uyo, the state's capital, and I remain your host, Onumese Ehinoma Olusegun. Always remember that on this show, our conversations continue on everyday political and economic developments in Nigeria and sometimes beyond. Our objective clearly is to always try as much as possible to make available vital information, arguments back and forth, and constructive conversations to consequently deepen our dear democracy as well as contribute our little quota genuinely towards nation building. Now, real quick, on President Tinubu's administration's calendar, which is pretty important, today is October the 4th, Wednesday, 2023. And it marks exactly 129 days of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in office as President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. This is now exactly 4 months and 9 days and as Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic. We begin with some political developments we are monitoring recently. Now, President Tinubu names 3 additional ministerial nominees. While some people catch a sigh of breath, some will be like, whoa. You know, the reactions are always mixed. Now, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has sent 3 additional ministerial nominees to the Senate for confirmation. Those he picked include Dr. Jamila Bayo, Balarabe Abbas, and Olawale Olawande. Now, before the new addition, President Tinubu had set the record for the highest number of ministers in Nigeria's 4th Republic since 1999 till date. Now, this will be 8 ministers more than 42 appointed by the former administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari. And then, you know, a lot of conversations on the issue of cutting costs and reducing the size of government has yet again emanated. Why so many ministries? What is the objective? Are we going to gain from it, or is it just going to be taken away from our common patrimony? Because some of these ministers can handle multiple projects, and those institutions can just be thrown under their ministries as probably departments and agencies of government. Okay, real quick, we expect that Senate will announce when these ones will be screened and join the other members to function as substantive or state ministers, whichever the portfolio that has been given. Moving to the next story now. Trouble for university students as SANU threatens fresh strike. Now, the Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities, SANU, is threatening fresh industrial action over unpaid 4-month salaries in 2022 of last year. This was contained in a communique read by its president, Muhammadu Haruna, at the end of its National Executive Council meeting on Monday. Now, SANU said over 100 of its members have died due to indebtedness, hunger, treatable sicknesses, depression, and starvation, all which are avoidable anyway. It noted that the federal government announcement of 5 billion subsidy palliative to states was only political. Now, SANU stated that even though it has not accepted the last 35 and 25% pay rise of Nigerian university workers, it has decided to politely but grudgingly ask the government to swiftly begin its implementation. SANU equally called on the Education Minister, Professor Tahir Maman, to conclude negotiation on the 2009 FGN SANU agreement and renegotiations as directed by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Now, SANU cautioned state governments against plans to pull their universities out of the university unions, warning that it could lead to an unending industrial disharmony. Now, SANU asks President Tinubu to quickly constitute universities' governing councils, even though it raises concerns over the usurpation of the board's power by the Office of the Heads of Service of the Federation. All right, we move to our next major story after that of the University Community Senior Staff Association of Nigerian Universities. We move to the Senate. And we're going to stay briefly on the Senate because there are a few developments that we'll also look at. Now, Senate amends rules and stops first-timers from running for the Senate presidency. Now, the Deputy Senate changed, the Senate changed its standing rules on Tuesday, October 3rd, effectively excluding members serving their first terms from running for Senate President and Deputy Senate President, respectively. Now, first-time senators are no longer qualified or eligible to run for the job of presiding officers of the Red Chambers, according to a recent revision to the Senate's standing rules. Recall that these rules are very powerful. Now, the amendment of the Rule 3, Sub 2, 1 to 3 of the Senate Standing Orders followed a motion moved by the Senate leader, Senator Okpeyemi Bamidele, leader as APT Ekiti Central, a very vocal man and a very, very strong ally of Tinubu. Now, this action by the Senate came after Senator Godswill Akpabio lost his race to become Senate President to Senator Abdulaziz Yari, recall, a first-time senator who had previously served in the House of Representatives. Now, the amendment was carried out at the plenary after the leaders of the Senate, Senator Okpeyemi Bamidele, moved a motion for the amendment of standing rules to accommodate new standing committees. Now, the motion, which was seconded by the Senate Minority Leader, Senator Simon Nwadukon, overwhelmingly received support of all the senators across all political affiliations when the President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio, put on the voice note. Let's watch the video briefly and move on.
The Senate amend Rule 3, Sub 2, 1, 2, 3, and 4 to clearly state that a senator vying for the office of the President of Senate and Deputy President of Senate must have served at least one term in the Senate as a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The Senate amend Rule 3, Sub 2, 1, 2, 3, and 4 to clearly state that a senator vying for the office of the President of Senate and Deputy President of Senate must have served at least one term in the Senate as a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
All right, a lot of arguments have ensued. Are these laws that are added to the standing rules within the Senate, are they born out of some personal reasons? Because we are hearing now that it probably may be because this current Senate President at some point was almost defeated and probably would not have gotten the position, and as such, first-timers who are greenhorns in the Senate, who have not served at least one dispensation, would not be qualified for key offices. Now, if the reasons why these rules are being adjusted are for benign reasons, there won't be any problem. But if there are sinister motives or to serve personal interests, then the conversations will continue. Remember, our responsibility to bring all these things to the fore. You be the judge. All right, still on the Senate, let's move to the next development. Senate carries out more amendments. We're going to run through a few of them just to keep you informed. Now, at the plenary also, the Senate carried out 9 other amendments aimed at accommodating new standing committees. Now, as shown in its motion, the Senate created the Committee on Atomic Nuclear Energy. Maybe at this point we'll start taking nuclear energy more seriously. So the Atomic Nuclear Energy, which would oversee the Nigerian Nuclear Energy Regulatory Commission. Now, the Nigerian Atomic Energy Commission and their annual budget estimates. The Senate also bifurcated the Committee on the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, into 2 different standing committees, and I'll name them. The Committee on FCT and the Committee on FCT Area Councils. Now, the Senate resolved that the Committee on FCT would oversee matters affecting the FCT, planning and development of the new Federal Capital Territory, and control of development within the Federal Capital Territory and its annual budget. Now, the upper chamber further resolved that the Committee on FCT Area Councils would oversee Area Council mandate, Area Council Service Commission, Area Council Staff Pensions Board, Auditor General for the Area Councils, and other agencies or departments under the FCT. That's a lot for Wike's Federal Capital Territory. Now, the Senate similarly divided the committees on sports into 2 standing committees to now reflect the Committee on Sports Development as well as Committee on Youth and Community Engagement. Now, according to the Senate, the jurisdiction of the Committee on Sports Development shall include Federal Ministry of Sports Development, National Lottery Commission, National Institute for Sports, Nigeria Football Federation, Sports Arena Development, National and International Sporting Activities, Sports Administration, and Annual Budget Estimates. Now, the Senate further said the jurisdiction for the Committee on Youth and Community Engagement should include Federal Ministry of Youth Development, National Youth Corps Service, National Youth Service Corps, I beg your pardon, Citizens and Leadership Training Centers, offices of the Senior Assistant to the President on Community Engagement in the 6 geopolitical zones, youth movement activities and associations, and its annual budget estimates also. Now, the Senate also divided the Committee on Solid Minerals, this one is very interesting, into steel development and metallurgy, into the Committee on Solid Mineral Development and the Committee on Mines and Steel Development. Now, the Senate said the Committee on Solid Mineral Development shall oversee Federal Ministry of Solid Mineral Development, Nigerian Geological Service Agency, Mining Cadastry Office, and Council of Nigerian Mining Engineers and Geoscientists. Now, Nigerian Metallurgical Training Institute, Solid Mineral Development Fund, Nigerian Institute of Mining and Geoscience, National Metallurgical Development Center, Exploration of Mineral Extraction and Quarry, Geological Surveys and Mineral Investigation, as well as Explosives. Now, the Committee on Mines and Steel Development shall oversee Federal Ministry of Mines and Steel Development, Aluminium Smelting Company of Nigeria, Ajaokuta Steel Development Company, National Iron Ore Mining Company, National Steel Raw Material Exploration Agency, and also their annual budgets. Now, the motion was titled Amendment of the Standing Orders of the Senate pursuant to Order 109 of the Senate Standing Orders 2022 as amended. Now, Rule 3 of the Senate Standing Orders as amended now stipulates that any senator wishing to contest for the position of the Senate President and the Deputy Senate President must have spent a minimum of 1 term in the Senate. We're back to the very, very first amendment now. Now, the Senate also amended its rules and created an additional 9 standing committee rules. Now, the Senate presently has 74 standing committees, and we hope that more details will follow as this new development emerge on these issues. More standing committees, lots of amendments, according to them, to make the structure and administration a little bit easier to work with. That is from the Senate. Now, moving to Labour, of course, we know that the major issue at the front burner of the national polity has been the federal government and Labour relations. And we understand, as we speak, that there's been some kind of suspension. It's no longer breaking news. So we go through it. Labour accepts federal government's proposal, suspend strikes for 30 days. Now, after exerting some concrete agreements to some of its demands, organized Labour shattered its sword, upturning its earlier advertised indefinite strike action to commence on the 3rd of October. Now, the Labour organs agreed to suspend its strike action for 30 days to enable the government to fulfill terms of agreement reached after hours of meeting the night before. Now, indications had earlier emerged that the planned nationwide strike would be suspended when officials of the NLC and the TUC returned to the presidential villa Abuja to conclude negotiations with the federal government, especially after a shift in government position as at Sunday night, resulting in 35,000 naira wage top-up across all ranks for federal workers. Now, owing to trust deficit between Labour and government, both parties had to lock themselves last night in another marathon meeting to fine-tune details of the agreements reached and signed a memorandum of understanding binding on all parties, that's both parties involved. Now, the MOU, a copy of which was signed by media last night and which was signed by NLC President Joe Ajaero and the General Secretary Emmanuel Waja, TUC President Festus Osifo, and the Secretary General Nuhu Toro, and federal government delegation. Now, Minister of Labour and Employment Simon Bakolalon, Minister of State for Labour and Employment Dr. Nkiruka Onyejocha, and Minister of Information and National Orientation Mohammed Idris had 15-point agreements. Now, top on the agreements reached were federal government grants a wage award of 35,000 to all federal government workers beginning from September, pending when a new national minimum wage is expected to have been signed into law. Now, a minimum wage committee to be inaugurated within 1 month from the date of the agreement, suspension of value-added tax collection on diesel for 6 months, beginning from October 2023, a vote by federal government of 100 billion for provision of high-capacity CNG buses for mass transit in Nigeria. And government plan to implement various tax incentives measures for private sector and the general public. Now, also on the agreement reached was a resolution in line with the relevant International Labour Organization conventions and Nigerian Labour Acts on the leadership crisis rocking the NURTW and purported proscription of the RTEN, that's road transport workers, on or before October 13. Now, outstanding salaries and wages of tertiary educations were also involved. Workers in federal-owned educational institutions referred to Ministry of Labour and Employment for further engagement. Now, federal government's commitment to pay 25,000 per month for 3 months, starting from October 2023 to 15 million households, including vulnerable pensioners, increasing its initiative on the subsidized distribution of fertilizers to farmers across the country, and a call out to state governments through the National Economic Council and Governors Forum to implement wage award for their workers, with similar consideration to be given to local government and private sector workers. The last leg of the 15-point agreement also include, and I'll go through it real quick, federal government's commitment to the provision of funds as announced by the President on the 1st of August broadcast for micro and small-scale enterprises, joint visitation to be made to the refineries to ascertain their rehabilitation status, all parties committing to abide by the dictates of social dialogue in all future engagements, and the NLC and TUC accepting to suspend for 30 days the planned indefinite strike earlier scheduled to begin as at yesterday, while the MOU will be filed with the relevant court of competent jurisdiction within 1 week as consent judgment by the federal government. Earlier, as details of the agreement reached were still being awaited, NLC President Ajero confirmed that in principle the strike had been called off after Sunday's resolutions were extensively agreed to by national executive councils of both NLC and the TUC. Now, Ajero, who noted that their demands were very clear, said Labour has not moved away from their demands, even as the federal government has probably matched up in 1 or 2 areas. Now, while the closed-door meetings were ongoing, the Maritime Workers Union of Nigeria released a statement that NLC and TUC have jointly suspended indefinite strike. This, he said, made the President General of the Association, Adewale Adeyanju, order that all the nation's seaports, jetties, oils and gas platforms and terminals be shut down accordingly for operations. However, he said, after the outcome of the emergency meeting summoned between the federal government and the labor leaders, NLC and TUC, had jointly agreed to suspend the strike to allow for implementation of labor demand. So the maritime workers are no longer on strike. Now, consequently, he said the NEC, that's the National Executive Committee of the NLC, had directed that all its affiliate members should direct their members to return back to work, as the planned indefinite strike has been suspended. Good news or bad news? Now, to this end, he added that Adeyanju, who is also NLC Deputy President, had equally directed that all workers in the maritime sector should resume work today, as instructed by NLC. However, National President of the Middle Belt Forum, Dr. Bitrus Pogu, said 35,000 salary increase to workers was akin to abandoning 99% of Nigerians going through poverty and deprivation. Now, Pogu, while reaching to the Independence Day speech by President Tinubu, argued that the speech was uninspiring and deceptive. He accused the Tinubu-led administration of worsening the socio-economic and security challenges in the country. Now, civil servants don't constitute up to 1% of the population of the country. What does that mean to the remaining 99% of Nigerians languishing because of this same situation? Now, I'll quickly add as I end this development, the former Director General of the Progressive Governors Forum, Dr. Saliu Lukman, has said that Nigeria can not muster the resources required to meet the demands by NLC. Now, Lukman, in a piece titled "Opening Door to Renew the Hope of Workers," argued that if revenue indices are anything to go by, the truth is that Nigeria is poor as at the current status. Now, he said with a federal budget of about 20 trillion, which is about $30 billion, Nigeria is operating at about a 10% deficit of its spending capacity compared to countries like Brazil, like India, Indonesia, and even South Africa, operating budgets of more than $200 billion. Now, he said the situation was further compounded by the fact that at state level, except for Lagos, none of the 36 states of the Federation has a 1 trillion budget. Now, with such a reality capacity, therefore, to make additional payments to workers to cushion the effects of high price of goods and services because of withdrawal of petroleum subsidy would be expecting too much. Now, while commending both the federal government and the NLC leadership for the landmark resolutions reached, which would have removed the threat of the October 3 strike action, it is important that the negotiation between government and organized labor is expanded to include all employers, inclusive of organized private sector and state governments. The negotiations should be oriented to produce agreements to improve productivity and produce higher revenue in all sectors of the Nigerian economy, based on which necessary framework of partnership agreements between all employers and organized labor in the country should be achieved. Now, we know that the NLC-FG relations is the thickest of all the national issues burning now. We'll go on a short break. Thereafter, we'll take 1 or 2 more developments and then introduce our guests so that the conversations will begin. Remember, this week is still X-raying Nigeria at 63. Where are we coming from? Where are we currently? And what are the expectations by the footprints of the current administration? Where are we going? It is Political Spectrum on Spectrum Television. We'll be right back. Join us again.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people. But there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTime's DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Nigerian police, which is the only one allowed by grossly abused. Our governors have to share police powers with the president as stipulated by the Constitution. We do not have a federal government police force. We have the Nigerian police force, which shall be administered, organized, and supervised by the Nigerian police force.
No, my lord, I want to say something. I want to say something here. Perhaps it might also enlarge the scope of people who should be invited here for examination. My lord, if we cannot find those who literally murdered Abiola, who are those people who could be said to be the beneficiaries of the death of Abiola?
Rogers has linked you with some of the killings he did.
He never did.
He linked you with the attempted murder of Hebrew.
He did not.
My lord, the matters council is leading the evidence in our matters.
Is this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord, but we can't be talking about cases which are in court,
Is
my lord.
this an adversary proceeding?
It's not, my lord. These cases are in court, my lord. I'm just reminding your lordship.
My lord, sorry, my lord, I think I'll be in cross-examination.
Legally Speaking, a program that deals with legal issues and questions we face as citizens of this amazing country, Nigeria. Legally Speaking. Join us every
Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m.
for Legally Speaking.
All right, many thanks for staying tuned. If you're just tuned in, it's Political Spectrum on Spectrum Television, and we have started looking at some of the developments in our nation's polity. Okay, while I take the final one, let me quickly introduce, because I already have my guest on standby from Benin City, Comrade Austin Osakwe. Comrade Austin Osakwe is a member of civil society and also a public affairs analyst. Good morning, sir. How are you doing, sir? Nice to see you, my comrade.
I'm good.
Nice to see you, my comrade. Happy Independence Day, sir.
Well, I wish Nigerians the same.
That's a good one, sir. All right, real quick. Reps move to recover 10 trillion pensions fund from the federal government. The House of Reps has resolved to investigate the state of pensions funds and recover 10 trillion loan to the federal government. The call was sequel to a unanimous adoption of a motion sponsored by Aliu Misau, PDP Bauchi State, at the plenary on Tuesday. Moving the motion earlier, Mr. Misau said the retirement savings accounts, which we refer to as the RSAs, are the lifelines that pensioners rely upon to cater to their needs upon retirement. He said the most pensioners cannot access their retirement funds despite complying with the requirements of the contributory pension scheme. Now, according to him, neither the National Pensions Commission, PENCOM, nor the Pensions Fund Administration, PFA, have been able to ensure prompt payment of entitlements. Now, the pension fund assets with PENCOM regulates being the proceeds of all contributory pension scheme and returns on investment stood at more than 15 trillion at the close of the first quarter of 2023. Now, there's no justification for retirees not to have access to the RSAs. Now, worried that critical stakeholders have expressed concerns that 65% of the funds, which amount to 10 trillion loan to the federal government, is an investment which exposes the contributors to unnecessary volatility, as the federal government may fail to pay back the loan in due time. Now, being unable to access their pensions has caused untold hardship to the retirees, as they are unable to afford even basic necessities, amongst others. Now, my comrade, a lot of issues are at the fore. And a few people have joined me this week assessing Nigeria at 63. I want you to have an opening statement for me. Nigeria at 63, how far have we fared? Where have we been? Where are we now? And by the policies of this federal government and the development so far, where are we going, comrade?
Well, thank you very much. It would be an understatement to say that Nigerian has come of age. Nigeria is an adult by all means. 63 is no joke. Some would say in the life of a country, that's just a trickle. But considering where we are coming from, 63 is by all means an adult age. The question as to where we are, I think that speaks for itself. Whether you look at it politically, socio-economically, and indeed from every facet, every perspective you look at Nigeria, you will see a crawling adult. You will see an adult that has come of age, married children, and yet is unable to provide for the safety, the security, the welfare of members of his own household. And if I were to borrow from scripture, that adult is of all men most miserable. It's worse than an infidel and has denied the faith. So that's where Nigeria is, a crawling adult that has not been able to fulfill its responsibility domestically and to the international community. As to where we are going, your guess is as good as mine, because the beginning tells the end. As we speak, there is confusion in the political landscape. 4 months after we have sworn in a president, we still have cases in court. Cases that are before the Supreme Court and cases that are before the American court. It's for the first time in the history of this country, there seems to be so much despair, so much unprecedented despair. We have more cases being decided in court now than the people have decided through the ballot box. That's a sad commentary on our politics.
Terrible.
On our socio-economic situation, we have workers whose take-home pay can no longer take them home. We have educational system that is almost comatose. We have health system, which we can borrow from Abacha again, if the man is able to regularly and seasonally send us some money to help us, we can also borrow his words to say that our health centers look like mere consulting clinics. Road system is completely dead. Look at from one federal road to another. It's tales of woe. A few days ago, several individual Nigerians were burnt while scooping fuel from a tanker that fell because of the terribly bad state of road in the Koko-Ologbo axis of Edo Delta. So from
Okay, I understand that Mr. Bode. Hello, comrade, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, all right, please, go on.
So for those who wonder whether there's hope for Nigeria, I'm one of the few. I'm an incurable optimist. Not because there is any sign in the horizon. Not because there is hope that we are going to have a better recruitment system. Not because we have seen political actors thrown up who have the ideas and the political will, the capacity, the competence to take us out of the woods. My optimism simply stems from what I understand as the natural order of things, that in every situation, change is permanent. It's the only thing that is constant. Whether we are changing in the negative or in the positive is another matter entirely. But I believe that God is not finished with us yet. However he wants to do it, I do not know, but I have no other option than to remain an incurable optimist that this country will, like the proverbial phoenix, rise from these ashes of despair and move on to be one of the greatest among the community of nations.
Wow, a lovely opening statement, comrade. All right, I understand that Mr. Bode Showumi is joining us also from Abuja. Mr. Bode, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome on the show. Nice to have you on the show. Well, we have started by looking at some of the developments in our nation's landscape. I know you are an energy expert, and energy is also critical in this administration and moving the economy forward. Now, to deliver on its climate targets and energy transition plan, President Bola Tinubu stated that the country will need to spend up to 17.7 billion annually. Now, speaking on behalf of the president at the African Climate Summit held at the Kenyatta International Conference Center, Nairobi, the Minister of State for Environment, Dr. Isiaq Salako, clearly made that assertion. Now, does this administration have a clear energy plan? Mr. Bode.
Well, thank you. You said that the minister spoke to some amount of money that will be needed, 17.7 billion, which, to my understanding, based on how the ministry works, it means that they will have come up within their system to come up with that. So I want to believe that there is some kind of thinking behind those figures. But more importantly, energy transition is a global phenomenon, and it is something to which Nigeria has signed on to. So whether, irrespective of whether we have a plan or not, there is a plan in place which we need to key into. But I also believe that we have a plan, primarily because at some point I'd engaged the Ministry of Environment under its predecessor, and there were some things they had in mind in terms of what they want to do and how they want to go about it. Whether that is the best plan is a different story, but they do have a plan, and I believe they have a strategy to go in about it.
Okay, but a lot of people will argue it because majority of the plans that the government is already expediting now are, clearly at the purview of the media. But that is a good way to start, and we are also hopeful that the energy policies, especially now that the Petroleum Industry Act has been signed into law, and not much was done under the last administration, because I think it was signed either 21 or 22 towards the threshold of the end of the last administration. But I'll come back to you, Comrade Osakwe. Recently, 3 names were announced again to be added to the ministerial list. Still in line with the, you've spoken very intelligently, and you have educated us on what, there was a term you used, a crawling adult, Nigeria at 63. Now, speak to the issue of leaders being conscious about reducing cost of governance and not over-bloating government, because this, yet again, has sparked off a lot of criticisms, especially from opposition, where people that are, loyal to the APC commend it. 50 ministerial nominees, 8 more than the previous administration. Please speak to this, comrade.
Well, some people have described Nigeria as a paradox. A paradox in the sense that, I mean, let's put it at the level of governance now. If there is anything that has been outed again and again in the past 4 to 6 months, it is the reality that we face as far as the cost of governance is concerned. So even those in government have continued to pledge that they want to reduce the cost of governance. I really don't know how that's going to happen. In one breath, you are asking Nigerians to tighten their belts. You are asking Nigerians to make more sacrifices. You see, there is the issue of perception. The average Nigerian you are calling on to tighten their belt. We now see that in the history of this country, we now have the largest bureaucracy, so to say, at the level of the federal government, and the states and local government are likely to act likewise. You say, but it's just 50 ministers. I am more concerned about the numerous aids, the infrastructure in terms of the bureaucratic needs and requirements to run these extra ministries. I'm wondering whether they want to create more ministries. We already have minister of state.
Yes.
I looked at, these 3 names, whereas 2 of them already were tied to the youth ministry. But I look at Balarabe Abbas. I'm wondering where is it going to fit into? Are you creating a fresh ministry, or is there somewhere there to tuck him into? So you have a very large bureaucracy. This government is not walking the talk. It ought to be cutting down the size of governance.
Exactly.
Whatever you can say is not it. It is the perception, the signal that you are sending to Nigerians, the same people who are suffering from the weight of the removal of subsidy. Ideal as that policy is, we know the repercussions, we know the fallouts. There is increasing poverty in the land. There is increasing unemployment. There is daily increase in the price of foodstuffs, medicaments. All of these are the reality that we face. And then you are raising.
Okay, we may have a little bit of a technical hitch there. Comrade, can you hear me? Okay, you're back.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right.
Now, let's look at other claims. America is, of course, more than double the size of Nigeria in terms of what it constitutes to run a government. Well, how many ministers do they have? Let's look at, that border us. How many ministers do they have? What is the size of their governance infrastructure? I think that the message needs to be sent to this government that it is being wasteful, it is being prodigal, and it needs to cut down on the size of governance, if only to just send a message to Nigerians that government feels with the people, that government is walking the talk, that when they ask Nigerians to tighten their belt, government is doing the same. For now, we can't see that.
Wow. That is very, very instructive. All right, Mr. Showumi, the Petroleum Industry Act was signed into law July 1st, 2021. And that PIB seeks to provide legal governance, regulatory, and fiscal framework for Nigerian petroleum industries. Now, popular or the most important in that act is the protection of the interest of host communities. I want you to speak to government's responsibility at making that bill work when in terms of protecting the host communities. Of course, you know the host communities now are agitated, demoralized. They sing songs of marginalization. Before the bill was signed, there was an argument between 3% and 5% and all that. I want you to speak to it, you know, moving forward with this administration and how relationships ought to be.
Primarily, the PIA is actually an act, not a bill. So when it is before the is a bill, when it is passed into law, it becomes an act.
Yeah.
Now, is a law, and like any other law, what they basically do is that they provide framework for which people will organize themselves. The PIA is not a magic bullet. It's not going to solve every problem, contrary to popular perception. But it is going to create a platform, an environment for which everybody will be able to work better. So prior to the PIA, the laws that were in the petroleum sector had been there since the 50s. So as per the host community, I don't know whether they had been agitated. I don't know if, obviously there are talks of agitation in the media, but there are also significant amount of money that has gotten in there. That's the political side of it.
Okay.
The fact remains that under the law, the money that used to go directly to chiefs and certain leaders among the host communities no longer goes to them. It's going to be hosted by a fund management community, which is going to be made up of certain stakeholders. And those things, to the best of my understanding, have been set up by the regulator. So under the law, the system has changed. It's not NNPC that is now responsible. It's the regulator, in this case is NUPRC, the Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission.
Okay.
And, basically that is the situation they are in as of today. That's my understanding of what's happening there.
Okay. But you said something very critical now. Comrade Austin, I'll come to you. Let me finish with Mr. Body. You said something very critical now, that you do not know if host communities feel marginalized or agitated. I think a lot of people will argue that with you. There's been laws. Now, this PIA has tried to make it broader and more structured. Now, the question is, what roles, what technical roles? Yes, we know there are laws. There are a lot of laws that we have that even the presidency or the government doesn't even have the willpower to follow suit, because the buck stops at the table of government. What would be your advice on managing host communities vis-a-vis spillages, marginalizations, percentages accrued to host communities? That was the question. Yes, I understand there is a law, but I want you to advise government, this administration.
So this is the thing. In a functional society or in a normal society, when laws are broken, there are law enforcement organs that are supposed to enforce the law. And if for any reason the law enforcement organs are not doing their work, there are critical aspects of society, such as NGOs and all that, who are supposed to put pressure on the respective organs of government to ensure that the system works. A functional society is a system. It is not a one-man thing. So it's the difference between a one-man business and a growing concern. So there is the thinking, there's this unitary thinking within the Nigerian public where everything lies at the bulk of the president. Technically, in terms of responsibility, you can say so, but it is not exactly true. Because the president is not going to do the work of the police for him. The president is not going to do the work of the judiciary. The president is not going to do the work of the legislature.
That's correct.
So, yes. So, even if technically is responsible, the people who are, once a law has come to place and people violate the laws, The people who feel violated have a right to approach the courts. They have a right to engage the police. They have a right to engage the military and all those whose responsibility is to ensure that the law functions. However, if we deflect responsibility away from these people and we ensure and we keep focusing on the president for everything, not only will we have a situation where most of what needs to be done is not done, we are creating a dysfunctional society. Because at the end of the day, what matters is a society that works, which is a society that works as a system. It is that systems approach that I think is missing in all of this. Like I said, in terms of what needs to be done, setting up the host community agencies, or not agencies, committees that will manage the funds. I believe some steps have been taken. I don't know what the latest on that area. The fund that we go for them to manage is already still there in escrow.
Okay.
But what is going to happen is that gone are the days where one chief or one interest group is suddenly going to come and say we represent those communities and they will collect a few billions.
And
all
they'll
of
go
that,
with it.
yes, all of that are things that are changing.
Okay, Mr. Bode, I like the way you have expanded it now, and you are of the opinion that responsibilities should be shared, because you mentioned that the presidency will not do the work of the police or the judiciary. I quite agree with you. Comrade Osakwe, you can see the line of argument. I want you to drop a comment on this before I move to your major question. What do you think about the federal government's relations or relationship moving forward with the host communities? You are staying in the Niger Delta. You are staying in areas where oil is being produced. So aside the theoretical PIA bill, you know the realities on ground, comrade. I want you to speak to that.
Well, quite unfortunately, I'm not one of those that have harbored any hope that the PIA is suddenly going to change the situation in host communities. We are familiar with what goes on in these communities. We are familiar with the touted government readiness to redress the kind of deteriorating and deplorable situation in the Niger Delta. What I can tell you is that as government goes and government comes, the situation there is worse and gets worsened by the day. One fact is clear. The community always holds the short end of the stick. I am happy with what Bode has put down as a systems approach. And I am happy that he mentioned that that's in a normal society.
Exactly.
What we now have come to realize is that Nigeria is far from being a normal society.
It's not an ideal situation, so to speak.
No, certainly not. I mean, the people you are talking about who are going to enforce laws, people who are going to enforce regulations, are themselves actors who are there for their vested interests. Everyone goes to the Niger Delta to get what he can get out of the place, and the people gets their condition gets worsened. They still can't get a good cup of potable water. Their children still can't attend schools in those communities. They still can't get good hospitals to take their people to, no Medicare. That is the reality on ground.
Exactly.
So the amount of money supposedly held in escrow for use, perhaps to improve the living conditions, the livelihoods of the people in the Niger Delta, that's going to also remain a mirage. Because the moment you put, it's one thing to say individuals cannot come from the community to collect the money. The people you have put the money in their hands now, the agency, they are also peopled by Nigerians who themselves also find it as an opportunity to take what they can take. After over 20 years, look at the UNEP report on the Ogoni cleanup.
Exactly.
What we do every day is to celebrate it. Not that the government can present facts on the ground. So I agree with Bode to the extent that we can't hold the president personally responsible for everything, because there are different levels of intervention, different levels of agency regulation.
And shared responsibilities.
But Nigeria is what it is.
Yeah.
Yes, until we put in place a system that works, that can hold people accountable for their infringements on the system, we are only going to continue only at the level of lamentation.
And that was my argument too with Mr. Bode, that yes, the framework, the laws look good, many pages, you know, but we've had situations where we have brilliant laws and execution becomes an issue. But they raised a very vital issue, saying that responsibilities must be shared. In as much as the buck stops at the desk of the president, all the ministries, agencies, and departments responsible should also play their role according to law. I quite agree. I stay with you, Comrade Austin Osakwe. Now, federal government finally sends a team to meet organized labor. We know what is at the front burner right now. Now, reaching certain agreements, and now NLC calls off the strike. People have said they should have gone on with the strike. Some persons, anyway, not all. And that cancelling that industrial action may yet again have reduced the efficacy of the NLC and the TUC at the round table. Now, how do you see this?
Well, first to mention that a nationwide strike, looking at it from the prism of organized private sector, was seen as something that will have further hurt the people and paralyze activities in the socio-economic sector, even the manufacturing sector. I agree with that sentiment. But I'm wondering whether NLC should have threatened, whether organized labor should have threatened strike anyway. Because when you say effective, we got past that long ago. I'm not sure even the workers themselves take the organized labor leadership seriously each time they talk about strike. You want to go, the first thing that struck me is that you want to go on strike and you give about 10 days notice. 10 days notice. The impression people get is that those 10 days are a window for personal negotiation with authorities. Well, that's what many people think, that, oh, they have given this time safe to say, government, come and see us so that we can do the needful. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I also agree that each time labor presses the button and it does not activate it, even for 1 or 2 days, it leaves workers confused. For a whole week, they went around mobilizing all the organs of organized labor. Why is it always the 11th hour that this thing is suspended? What was government team waiting for? Why did he engage labor several days, if not weeks, before the 11th hour? It appears government is smarter than the NLC. They just wait till the last minute, roll in the drums, keep the leaders in a room. Only God knows what goes on behind those closed doors. And then predictably, organized labor comes to say, we have suspended the strike. Now, to go further, I looked at the so-called agreement, if we are to call it an agreement.
Agreement. Temporary agreement.
What exactly has government offered? What has it given? We are in this country. We know that government has offered even more than this in the past. Which one of them has been implemented? Why is organized labor not a good student of history? Why are they not looking at where we are coming from? What is the guarantee that after 30 days, labor will not come back to say, all of these, none has been done? I hear they want to go to a court of competent jurisdiction to go and file this, as if that's a magic wand. This is the same government all over that disobey court orders with impunity. Is it one paper supposedly signed between labor officials and government that government is now going to scrupulously implement because it's afraid of one court a contempt process?
And these are the realities.
Millions of Nigerians have limitations in understanding what exactly NLC seeks to achieve. Number two is that the entire workforce of the federal government is less than 800,000. So these promises made by the federal government is going to these minute segment of the working population? What happened to state governments? What happened to local governments? What happened to the private sector? Does NSA not spare a thought for this larger segment of the population? If you ask me, we should stop talking about NSA and TUC. Should stop talking about strikes. Now, the TUC and NSA had this disagreement, where TUC was saying they wanted to give government 2 weeks to look at all the things they wanted to understand.
Negotiate
NSA
further.
said we're going to go on a warning strike. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm wondering, at what point did they now come together? What exactly was not there that was now there with the TUC and NSA coming together to say they wanted to go on strike? I think that there's a lot more happening behind the scene. And if you say you are adding 25,000, which eventually became 35,000,
yes,
why don't you just do an outright review of the minimum wage? Anyway, it appears after 6 months they expect this country to fold up. Because if they don't expect that, why are you saying you are giving this money for 6 months? Are you saying that somewhere along the line, after 6 months, you just say, Eureka, the country is now much better than it is now? So everything is tentative, it's temporary. We can't run Nigeria on a temporary basis. We must run Nigeria along structures that work, along enduring structures that work. If you want to review workers' wage, please review workers' wage. Don't dash them money. Don't give them temporary relief. It's pyrrhic, and it's not good for any system.
A lot of people will agree with you, comrade. And thank you so much for enumerating it that clearly. And I want to also quickly add that people have argued and criticized that this current NLC, most times, they have observed that when they call off an action, a proposed action or industrial strike is always in the middle of the night as the one that was done. And that is not a good image for organized labor. So a lot needs to be done. Mr. Bode Showumi, you know, we are handling all the issues, and I will draw your attention to these recent developments. There was an explosion in Emohua in Rivers State because of certain persons probably scooping petroleum products. Another one happened between Ologbo and Koko on your way to Benin City, killing scores of Nigerians. I don't know, I know you are an advocate for shared responsibility. Government, stakeholders, and the citizens. What would you advise as we gradually wrap up on the conversations of the show? Mr. Bode.
You know, sometimes we are special people, Nigerians, and then sometimes we need to be told the fact. There is nobody that does not know it is illegal or dangerous to go and scoop fuel. There's absolutely nobody that doesn't know that. Now, if a person comes from a home where there's no home training and he becomes a hooligan in society, yes, it is still part of government's responsibility to ensure that the youths are responsible. But there's also a responsibility of the home to ensure that the child that is leaving home today is actually a fit one for society. By the time we abandon the responsibility of the parents for government, we are going to end up with hooligans. There is no way around it. When people need to be told that what is wrong, and when people who do what is wrong are being pampered and being told that it is poverty that is making you to do it, government needs to fix everything. We are making people not to be responsible for themselves. Yes, there is a place for government. Absolutely, there's no doubt. And that place for government is the fact that they should ensure that the pipelines are not burst. They should ensure that the system is working and all that. But what if government is not able to do it? Does it mean that people should go and commit suicide? Does it mean that people should go and do what is wrong? You get? So these are questions we need to ask ourselves. This is not even really about a technical analysis. These are questions that normal societies need to ask themselves. That, yes, government doesn't need special explanation. They are failed. You understand? But If government has failed, must we fail with them? Must people die with them? I mean, those are questions that people need to ask. So, and it is based on things like that people start to become responsible.
But
there's no government that can turn an irresponsible.
But in as much as I agree with you, a lot of people would say poverty, the current situation of the economy, hunger, desperation, may be the major issues that are not being addressed. Because we are talking about petroleum products, we are talking about probably fuel in this case that has killed a lot of people. Would you say those factors are not, it's more on the responsibility of the people? People should not, do the wrong things. Have you seen a man really get hungry and become desperate, in recent times, really with the status of the economy, Mr. Bode? Because we are talking realities.
Okay, so you see these poverty agreements. I've heard it since I was a teenager. In fact, when we're in school, there are some girls who will go out over, and the usual excuse is that it is poverty.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Bode, can you still hear me? Okay, real quick, Comrade Osakwe, while we're still dealing with the technical issues, I want you to respond to that. Emohwa, Ologbo, Koko, scores dead, desperation, current situation of things, poverty, despair, desperacy. What will be your general comment on this? I don't want to limit it.
Okay, it appears Bode is still...
yes, he will rejoin. He will rejoin. Just go on. Just go on, sir.
For me... Okay, all right.
Go on, sir. Go on, comrade. Comrade Austin, please go on.
Okay. So, for me, it's less of poverty than it is of ignorance. I think there's palpable ignorance amongst our people. Everybody who is poor doesn't have to go and put their lives on the line. Yes, there is poverty, I understand, but it's more of ignorance. Right from Jesse through other incidents of this nature, people tend to forget, and we go through the same merry-go-round of wanting to find out why these things happen. In the particular case of Ologbo in Edo Delta,
boundary.
The trailer fell because you need to see those pictures. There is no road at all. It was an attempt to navigate a way, meander through those terrible states of roads, that this tanker fell. And a mixture of poverty and ignorance, people went in there and began to scoop. So when I fault government is that from one federal road to another, you need to visit the Edo axis to Abuja, visit the Edo axis to the east-west road. You come and see the state of roads. It's intolerable. There is no excuse. The federal government has left these highways in the very terrible state of disrepair that they are in. That's where government blame comes on. But I agree on one point with Bode that we need to do more conscientization. Look, Nigeria, we have not mobilized our people. We have not conscientized them. We have not galvanized them. I've always said that what a leader does is to cast a vision. Having cast that vision, which you are convinced about, mobilize, conscientize and galvanize the people to embrace that vision. That's nationalism, that's nationhood, that's patriotism. That's what other leaders do in other climes. Leaders are not magicians, they are not supermen. But they are able to surround themselves with people who make up a solid team, plan a vision, cast it for the people to see, and mobilize the people to embrace that vision. So that's where shared responsibility comes in.
Yes.
You don't mobilize people for a cause. You can't blame them because they are acting at cross purposes with government. In Nigeria, government is going on their own, the people are going on their own. Once you have this disconnect, you can't have growth, you can't have development, and you can't have governance.
Well said. All right, Mr. Bode, welcome back. And sorry for the small glitch. You know, glitch has become one major thing in our lexicon now. All right, I want to quickly put this to you. The CBN is under scrutiny as we speak. There is an investigator, a special investigator from the presidency doing a lot of work. But our focus is not on the CBN. My question is to the NNPCL. By the PIA, I think NNPC has now been renamed to NNPCL. But a lot of people are agitating that as we speak, government should really be seen to be investigating or auditing, you know, the activities of the NNPCL, which goes beyond just the funds realized and all that. I want you to also speak to that. What do you think we'll probably find? What will be your advice to people who are saying, let us audit the NNPCL? Yes, Mr. Bode, go on.
So when you say audit, because audit of operations is a technical issue. It basically looks into how they function and in order to make it more effective. Auditing of finances is for the financial people. Basically, auditing is a requirement by law. So in other words, I would expect that they have a private auditor, maybe KPMG, maybe private audit for them, and they also have the auditor, the office of the Auditor General. So between those two groups, I want to believe that there should be some amount of some amount of sanity in terms of proper audit. However, should they audit NNP and they found that there are irregularities there, which is different from the report that the have found, and it's different from what the Office of the Auditor General does. It's not only NNPC who will be culpable, it is also all these people that will be culpable. So that is for those to do those things. Yes, CBN may be scrutinized now, but it's not just that should be done, as you pointed to. NNPC should be scrutinized, and all the agencies of government should be scrutinized, because we are trying to ensure an effective workforce. And it is also important even to send signals to those coming after that you can't just get away with anything, because part of the reason why there is impunity, why corruption is so entrenched, is because there are no consequences. Nigerians, if they leave the shores of Nigeria, they didn't suddenly change. It's not like they came born again when they got. It is because the systems are in place to ensure there are consequences for the act that they do. The big man who was on the queue with you on the plane, once he gets to Heathrow, he's going to queue. I mean, the big man that refused to queue, once he gets to Heathrow, he's going to queue with everybody.
That's a fact.
They are going to ask him questions, and he's not going to complain. So, and why is these things like this? Because the system, again, I speak to those things. A functional society is a system, because the system, the culture in those places, that's what they permit. One of the reasons why there is also lawlessness is because our culture and our system permits it. For example, we were talking about those that went to scoop petrol. Nobody is saying that they made irresponsible decisions. They are saying it is government. So next time when younger people want to go and do those things, their thinking is that, yes, I can go in ignorance because people will say it is the fault of government if I die. So at the end of the day, when you look at all these things, yes, NNPC should be audited. Yes, every agency of government should be audited. And that is how normal society functions. Those are my own views.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Comrade Austin, I'm going to ask you the final questions as we begin to land. The issues facing Nigeria are endless. So time is never enough for us to exhaust it. Yes, Comrade. Recently, the Senate has come out to warn the president on spending outside the budget. When I say that, I'm referring to the 100 billion that the president is advocating for compressed natural gas vehicles to alleviate or at least bring down the sufferings of the average Nigerian. And then the Senate is also in plenary. They were in plenary recently, and their objective also is to investigate the 10 trillion from the pension fund account, which a lot of our senior citizens are complaining that they don't even have access to their pensions. Now, the Senate is involved in a lot of issues that are quite sensitive, but a lot of people are saying, yet again, this Senate Assembly may just be a glorified rubber stamp, and that they can only make all the noise and say all the things within the chambers where they have immunity and they can speak as they want. Do you see this 10th Assembly as such? And what solutions will you prefer as we begin to wrap up, sir? Comrade Austin Osakwe.
Again, unfortunately, those who are in government come from among the people. What you see them exhibit in government is what they exhibit as individuals. Now, I'll tell you this. The average Nigerian wants to spend money that he has not earned. Look at the way of life of Nigerians. We just keep spending, even when we know that that spending is not founded in the reality of what we earn. That's what you find in government. You know, several months ago, I think early this year or late last year, the governor of Edo State, Mr. Gordon Obaseki, accused the CBN of printing money, accused the government of printing money. And
that's correct.
But we now find that it was justified. He's been vindicated of this whole thing about ways and means. Just a metaphor for irresponsibility in governance when it comes to spending. How is it that you have a budget? The budget is supposed to contain you within your income in terms of your expenditure. So you are spending based on what you earn. So you have deficit budget already, but you still go beyond that and begin to appropriate that which you don't have. Number two, you spend that which is not appropriated. I jokingly asked the question before. Every Christmas and
Austin Osakwe, we'll be speaking to Comrade Austin Osakwe. And the arguments back and forth on the issue of deepening democracy and nation building will also continue. Remember to reach us on all our social media handles. Our website is www.spectrumtvlive.ng. You're sure to get all the content and all the news reports and everything you need to get on our shows. We will be back tomorrow on a fresh edition and with very, very sound and experienced resource persons to argue these issues tomorrow. I remain yours sincerely, Onwese Ehinoma Olusegun, signing out and saying have a great day. See you on the next edition.